Hi, this is Doug Donovan, co-host of the European Nights Project Roundtable Radio Podcast. I'm being joined by the founder, Gio Wolf. How's life in England, Gio?
It's pretty good. How's life back in the U.S.?
Well, it's entertaining, to say the least.
Yep, that's the direction the world has gone. It's definitely entertaining.
Yeah, it is. Well, on this program today, we will not be discussing whether Jimmy Page passes the one-drop test or degenerating into topics you hear on Philistine Renegade Broadcasting or Stormfront. Before we commence with our first broadcast, I'd like to state for the record what the EKP are and aren't. First off, in spite of what our Marxist and Zionist critics are spewing, the EKP are not a hate group, nor do we advocate hatred of any kind. However, we don't lie back and take it from the destructive left or the ignorant, misguided factions of the right either. We discuss the difference between communistic white internationalism, or white Bolshevism, and our unique brand of Anglo-Saxon and Western European culturalism and ideology based on the traditional idea of civic nationalism, as opposed to, well, the modern Marxist and Zionist interpretations of the term. In essence, it's an idea of love, camaraderie, preservations of tradition, family, culture, or individual national sovereignty, and not the hate-filled reactionary movement has been portrayed as. By the end of our shows, you will understand that too. And civic nationalism is not left, it's not right. In fact, Gio says it's radically centered. We'll ask him why in a moment. We're anti-Marxist. Over the course of these programs, we'll be discussing how Marxism impacts our society and how cultural Marxism was implemented in Western Europe because superior Western European culture was able to fend off economic Marxism. Thank goodness. We'll be discussing how this impacts Anglo-Saxon nations of the Old and New World. In this first episode, we'll be discussing who the EKP are, our goals, philosophies, ideas, etc. We'll also be discussing South Africa and how Marxist radicals, via their black pawns, have decimated a nation and how this relates to our struggles in the West. You'll also be getting to know Gio Wolf, the director, founder of EKP, and yours truly, Doug Donovan, U.S. correspondent, a voice of the EKP Roundtable radio podcast, and advocate of freedom and liberty. For more information on Anglo-Saxonism and Western European culturalism, please visit our main website at EuropeanNightsProject.com. Oh, and just a quick warning, we do not always use the most politically correct language, so be forewarned. All right, now, Gio, what is it?
How's it going over there? How's it going?
well, you know it's going good.
I'm looking forward to doing the show. It's the first of its kind we've done here. I mean, obviously I've been on the radio before with on other networks, but it's actually fantastic to have your own network and be able to really get your word out.
Yeah, it is, and you've done a lot to make that happen.
And so have you. So this is going to be a great show, and hopefully the folks that are tuning in are going to join us, once a month or whenever we put these out, and so we'll see how it goes.
Well, I hope so. I think that'll be a good thing. All right, so what is it that makes us different from the Stormfront crowd? I mean, why would you call them Philistines? That's kind of derogatory, huh?
Yeah, well, I mean, a Philistine is an anti-intellectual. I mean, folks that want to sit around bashing one another because of the fact that they might have 2% of some kind of non-white blood in their body is nonsensical. So we're not going to engage in that sort of discourse. To think that we're going to be bashing folks because they have a drop of something different in them is nonsensical. So that's not the route we're going to take here. I mean, we're civic nationalists, and although we are racial realists, in this situation, at our point in the world today, there's no way we can get around the fact that our societies are mixed. So we have to make the best of the situation and find a way to bring people together and push forward under the banner of our individual flags and in our case in Europe and where I live in Britain and where you live, Anglo-Saxon traditions, and we need to preserve those. So our enemy is not the, let's just say, 1/8 black person who lives next door to us because he's 1/8 black. That's not our enemy. Our enemy is the type of person who hates that person and the type of person who turns that person against us because he's a little different. So that's who we're attacking here. We're not attacking that person. We're attacking the sort of folks, Marxists, who will use that person who is a little different to attack us and attack our society, and the type of person who hates that person because of the fact he's different. So we're trying to avoid the divide and conquer crowd. We're going to bring people together. We're not going to divide and conquer people.
Well, that's fantastic. Could you elaborate on what you mean by the one drop rule referred to earlier and why we won't even entertain that sort of conversation?
Well, because like I said earlier, the bottom line is, I mean, if you live in a Western country, there's no one who's going to be purely from that country anymore. Although there are a lot of indigenous people, and that's fantastic. We want to preserve those indigenous cultures and indigenous bloodlines. We certainly know that there's a lot of great people who live in our countries that are not indigenous to the country. I think we have to accept that and move forward. It doesn't mean we have to embrace immigration. Immigration is a scourge. It's a tragedy, especially illegal immigration. But we also want to be careful that we don't, hate people who live in the country just because they might have an ancestor who was an immigrant, and that's a big mistake. I think we have a lot bigger fish to fry today than worrying whether Jimmy Page, the guitarist for Led Zeppelin, was an eighth Oriental, whatever he was, or Slash, the amazing guitarist for Guns N' Roses, was a quarter or half black or whatever. I mean, this is the sort of stuff they talk about on Stormfront, and we're not going to get into that. I mean, literally, you go on that website, and they're saying, well, I wouldn't date Kate Beckinsale because of the fact that she's a quarter Burmese. I mean,
she's hot.
Exactly. I mean, at the end of the day, that might annoy some people who turned in today, but we're not going to get into that. I mean, that's complete nonsense. It's garbage. We're here to preserve our culture, our traditions, and of course, the racial element of the country. However, we're not going to devolve into a situation where we're going to bash people because they're a little different than we are. I mean, our countries are strong enough to withstand some other people here. What we can't withstand is 50 million illegal Mexicans coming to the United States, or 2 million Poles coming to Britain, or 1 or 2 million more Islamic people coming to Europe. That we cannot withstand. I mean, Europe cannot withstand that sort of a migration. It can't, regardless of nationality, religion, or race, it cannot. I mean, Britain, to remain British, will have to keep mostly British, obviously mostly British origin in the people, and make sure they drive home the fact that you want to live in Britain, you abide by British rules, laws, and you adhere and assimilate into British culture. That way, Islam is incompatible with Britain. And of course, it also says that the people of Eastern Europe, who may be racially very similar to British, because they can't adapt right away because of their language, it's better if we close the door on immigration from anything outside of Western Europe. And that's kind of the policy we have. But I think that's where we go back to South Africa, is that there's a crisis in South Africa right now where there's literally, hundreds of thousands of people's lives at risk, minority South Africans, the majority of whom are either Afrikaner, Boer, Anglo, or even Indian. And these people are under constant threat by the black majority. And a lot of people want to emigrate to Britain, United States, and they have a hard time doing so because we have these ridiculous immigration policies that favor Poles from Eastern Europe or family members of Nigerians. I mean, we need to find a way to get the right people to the country, to preserve our national sovereignty, and to assimilate people who fit into our countries who are compatible to the countries. And so I think that's the message of our show, really, about cultural compatibility, preservation of our cultures. We're not going to argue about, nonsense like we said, Kate Beckinsale being a quarter or an eighth Burmese. That's not what we're here about. We'll leave that to the morons on Stormfront.
Well, that sounds good. Well, you're talking in there quite a bit about separatism and different things being used to separate people. Does that seem pretty common to you today?
Unfortunately, yes. I mean, I think we all know that the Marxist left utilize the fact that we are a little different, and there is hatred between us to their advantage. So instead of, Marxists supposedly representing the poor or the oppressed or the non-white or whatever, they just use these people who obviously have had some issues in the countries they lived in against us, against the majority. And this is the problem. So what we got to do is find a way to embrace everybody who lives in the country, who wants to be in the country, who is assimilated, who speaks English first, who wants to assimilate completely, who does not have any foreign allegiances. We want to make sure they know that they should be grateful to the country they're living in. And we get rid of this Marxist nonsense. That's the key. I mean, obviously, the people behind Marxism are themselves, in their mind, alien people. The majority of them are Zionists, and they have their own allegiance to a foreign entity. And that's a key to our discourse here, is the fact that the Marxists themselves, although they can pass themselves off as locals, they're not. Their mind is somewhere else. And the majority of them obviously have an allegiance to a foreign nation. The majority of Zionists, if you look at whether it's in the United States, Saul Alinsky, or in South Africa with Nadine Gordimer, or Joe Slovo, or in England with Ed Miliband and his father, these people do not have an allegiance to the country they're in. They may look like the indigenous population, but they do not think like the indigenous population. I think this is the key here. And so, obviously we don't want to devolve into hating any group, but we want to make sure that we point out which groups are causing trouble and which groups aren't. And we want to get people on the same page here so we can get our societies back on the right course.
All right, but uh, so you're saying that when in Rome, do as the Romans do.
Well, certainly, you know,
You know,
I
as
think
far
I
as
think most folks would do that. I mean, if you come to Britain, I mean, I think the majority of people who move to Britain would love to assimilate into Britain who've come in the past. The problem is, you're being told. Let's look at America, for example. I mean,
yeah,
you have everyone's being told that they're an Irish American, they're an Italian American, they're a Black American, and what you got to ask, why is this being done? Is it because they are these things? No, it's not because of that. It's because it's a way to keep people apart. I mean, the left allows racist factions in the country, like the La Raza, which is the Hispanic American population. They allow this population to remain separate because the people at the top of the left, typically Zionists, are able to then remain separate themselves. So a weaker national culture enables individual cultures, specifically one individual culture, Zionist culture, to remain at the top. And so once we find a way to tell people, look, you live here, you abide by our rules, you speak our language, you're grateful. If you're not, you don't live here. That's it. Bottom line. I think that we can do that, but we cannot do that until we find a way to kind of cut the head off the beast who is dividing everybody. And I think that's the key to our discourse. And that's what happened in South Africa. I mean, they never were able to cut the head off the beast that was taking down South Africa. The beast was run by a bunch of former Eastern European Marxists who infiltrated South Africa, who were given refugee status after World War II. And instead of embracing South Africa, they found their way to kind of use the black man as a pawn against the South African people. And I mean, and that's what's happening now in Western Europe. That's what's happening in the United States. We can discuss this for months. But the bottom line is, I mean, the people behind the left, the dividers, the subversives, they're typically only out for their own good. And the majority of them, you look at their last names, you look at their backgrounds, we don't need to discuss exactly who they are, but most folks do know that the people behind the plan are not indigenous to the country. They themselves see themselves as a foreign enemy, and that's a big problem here. So what we got to do is find a way to focus on the people in the country, get them on the same page, and drive out the subversives so that the countries can move forward.
yeah. Well, see, like here in the United States, I've noticed that the people who are immigrating in and doing so legally actually have a great respect for the country because they're learning all kinds of different things. And you don't see that too much in the news, that people are grateful to be able to become a U.S. citizen, for instance.
Yeah,
Which,
exactly. Well, I mean, like you said, I mean, these people come in the right way, come in because of the fact that they have the skills, and they've given the opportunity because of the fact they can offer the United States something. And so these are not representative of the left. The left wants people who have no skills, have absolutely no business being in the country. That's who they represent. Folks that are going to be oppressed when they come in, who've been oppressed from birth. Someone who comes from, let's just say, whatever, even a computer programmer from, let's say, Poland or from India. They come to the country and, they're happy to come. And they don't have a foreign allegiance anymore. They want to assimilate. They want to enjoy the country. It's the millions of wayward migrants that come in who have no desire whatsoever to assimilate, who are just there to, get some freebies and, move, get their lives on the right track for themselves, not for the country. And that's a big problem.
wow, so that's happening over there too.
Oh yeah, big time. But because we have the European Union, the European Union has made it so every Western country has had to accept Eastern European migrants in. And unfortunately, I mean, for example, we had Eastern European people coming to the country prior to the expansion of the European Union, and then those people are very different. They came in to become teachers and doctors and nurses, and they themselves usually assimilated, typically either married local or they raise their kids as locals. But the new people come in, they're waving their nationalistic flag, they're waving the Polish flag. It's funny, the dynamic is interesting because a lot of people don't realize that they come in because of our left. Our left enables them to come in. The communistic EU and the communistic people on the left allow these people to come in, and they bring in the most kind of right-wing, ignorant people from these countries into the country. So it creates a tinderbox. I mean, these people don't like being here. They hate the country. And at the end of the day, they have no business being here, other than the fact that the EU has decided that they should be here, and they're not going to help our country move forward. I think in the U.S. that's the case as well.
Well, so what do you think the purpose is then of the European Union? There's going to be an American Union soon because it seems to be happening all over. You think these are just steps toward like a one world government or something?
Oh, certainly, yeah, of course. I mean, your American Union is already there. I mean, NAFTA. You look at the North American Free Trade Agreement between the United States, Canada, and Mexico.
Yeah, from
I mean,
'96.
Yeah, all that did was destroy the economy. That was implemented by both the left and the right. You get Republicans saying, "Oh, it's a leftist thing." Well, interestingly, Reagan devised that one, and Bush signed it. So Reagan and then Bush won. Bush dad. Those are the guys behind the whole thing, and these are considered right-wing Republicans. At the end of the day, it's good for business. It's good for the Republicans. If it's good for voting, it's good for the Democrats. So Obama wants the Mexicans to come in so they can destabilize the country. There's more leftist voters. And the right, the Republicans want them in because they work for $2 an hour, so everybody wins at the top.
Oh my God!
Yeah, the people who suffer are the people who live, in the working class communities, have to live alongside people who are not culturally compatible with the country. And this drives, obviously ruins communities. It drives people to the suburbs. It, creates white flight. It's very damaging to the country. Bringing in a limited amount of immigrants to fill in roles in the country is one thing. Allowing 50 million people to walk in across a border to destroy the country for different reasons. One, Republicans get rich. Their buddies in the private sector get rich by hiring illegals to pick, tomatoes for 50 cents an hour. And then you got people on the left who, watch the country get ruined. Obviously they live for that sort of thing. So, it's destructive. And of course, like you said, one world government. It's a lot easier to control people if everybody's fragmented. If you have one strong national culture, it's a lot harder to subvert these people. I mean, that's what the Zionists do. They subvert. And they're not able to do that when the country is strong. And so they obviously want the country to be weakened so they can subvert the culture. They were able to do that in Eastern Europe through economic Marxism. In the West, they're able to do it through cultural Marxism. And we were strong enough to withstand that economic Marxism. Western European culture is so strong it could withstand Marxism. However, they devised a new technique to subvert, which cultural Marxism, which has been exponentially more dangerous and has pretty much destroyed the Western culture at this point. I mean, I don't want to say destroyed because I think we can move forward still, but unfortunately, damage has been done. I mean, you look at the state of the country, the state of the people, the people having abortions, getting pregnant at 13, drug and alcohol use all over the place, and all by design. This is not unintentional; it was all by design.
Yeah,
look at it this way: even the black community in the United States today, 90% of all black kids is born without a dad. In the 1940s, 90% of all black kids were born with a dad. So people say, oh, because blacks are this or blacks are that. I'm a racial realist. I know what blacks are and what they're not. However, to say that it's because blacks are black is the reason they don't have dads around, it's not true. It's because of the people who subverted their communities. Simply put, men like Saul Alinsky, Trotskyism. It's all about subverting people for your own gain. So, I think we need to move. We can only move forward when we find the root of the problem here, and that's why we're civic nationalists. We're not racial nationalists because we believe the good of our country. For the good of our country, we can quite easily identify which groups are causing problems and then remove them from the equation. It doesn't have to be on racial lines. It could be on the fact that we know this group is an enemy of the state, an enemy of the nation. So you don't have to say they're an enemy because they're this ethnic group. No, it will work out itself. You can find the people who are causing problems without using any racial or ethnic hatred to do so. And we can easily find those people just by being pragmatic.
Wow, you've covered a whole lot in that.
Man, when I get going, Dougie, when I get going,
yes,
I only stop for a breath and a coffee.
Good deal. I have a.
Why don't you tell us a little bit? I mean, why don't you tell us a little bit of your background as well, so people get to know you. I mean, you're obviously you care about freedom. Your whole point of being on the in the EKP is because you believe America's lost its way in terms of it's no longer a free state. It's no longer an Anglo-Saxon state. It's become this mishmash of cultures where everyone hates everybody, and the government has snatched the freedom away from people, and private industry has run wild. Greed has taken over, and why don't you tell us your feelings about the United States and why you want to reclaim Anglo-Saxon culture for the U.S. and get America back on its feet?
Yeah, well, back a long time ago, I took an oath to uphold the Constitution and to do all kinds of crap that you really can't do. From my time in the military, that was that was awesome. But since then, I've gotten into trying to, because there's so many violations of the Constitution going on at so many levels, and the Bill of Rights, freedom and liberty, people seem to be in apathy about these topics. And you can even go on to Wikipedia today and see that, well, freedom, they don't even bother defining it, okay? You can define it just by saying another word, unrestrained. Action, beingness, whatever. Okay, but that's what freedom is. It's basically unrestrained, but you're also dealing with lots of people, and if everybody was completely unrestrained, blah blah blah.
Well, I mean,
And
it's interesting because I look at it this way. I mean, after 9/11, the government used the idea that to preserve the freedom of the American people, they need to implement these kind of draconian measures to take the freedom away of the American people. So it's hilarious. You could say to people, "Well, I'm protecting your freedom as an American by taking your freedom away." I mean, the Patriot Act basically took away everyone's freedom in the country. It allowed the government to tap into our phones, to look at what we're writing on the internet. It allowed them to basically strip search children at the airport, put metal detectors in places where people should feel comfortable and free. And they always use these. It was 9/11. We're not going to get into what 9/11 was all about. But at the end of the day, it definitely worked out for American government, didn't it? I mean, 9/11, was a tragedy on all accounts, regardless of how we believe it happened. But at the end of the day, it became a coup for big business, for government. I mean, the Iraq War, the Afghanistan War, all the money that was made. I mean, it helped nobody in the country except for people at the top. So, and obviously now the American government has taken almost every last freedom away from the people. You look at the Obama administration; they've taken even more freedoms away for different reasons. They have their own reasons. For them, it's about being, well, they have their own leftist reasons. To protect people, you take other people's freedoms away. To protect people's feelings, you take other people's freedom away. Like, you can't say something on television because you're going to offend somebody. So the freedom to have your opinion has been taken away. I mean, it's whether it's the left or the right, they always find a way to kind of work in conjunction with one another to take away the freedom of the people. And that's what I find most appalling about the United States is the left and the right are on the exact same page. There is no difference. They ideologically appear different, but the end result is the same.
Yeah, what you've been talking about is freedom from. Okay, in order to take away freedom, to restrain our actions and who we can be and all that, they have to give us something to be free from, and that's not freedom. It's freedom from.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, it's just a different thing. Like, you put us in water and we have freedom from air. Okay, we drown. Freedom from is a way toward death. But it's necessary for a game. Not that we have to be in water, but you have freedom from versus freedom. Okay, freedom.
Yeah, of course. And that, of course, that was the design from the beginning. I mean, they just want to take away the freedom. They needed some kind of event. They always need some kind of event to take away your freedom. So, that's the key to. That was the key, really, pretty much to.
Well, wow, yeah, because we could go all into that thing for hours and days and weeks, probably. You just look at the European Union and what happened with Greece here just a few years ago.
Of course, we have a lot of communication with the Golden Dawn Party. EKP are quite close to members of the Golden Dawn. We actually exposed why they were taken down and who took them down, in which it was basically a takedown from an external power. We can go into that now if you want. It's up to you.
I'll save that for a separate show. It's a huge topic.
Yeah.
But you were also talking about the subversion of very different classes and cultures within, like, America, within England, within, well, even other parts of Europe.
Sure.
And what are some of the tools that are being used to separate the people and cause, hatred besides the press and the news? You have misinformation and disinformation, just different intelligence topics to overthrow.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Portions.
The left is they're unique in the sense that they're able to kind of capitalize on other people's misfortune. So if there's for example, if there's one incident where, for example, a black person is mistreated, let's just say, there's probably 1,000 other instances where blacks have been treated wonderfully or have been given jobs or had their lives actually set out for them perfectly. However, what the left will do is find that one instance and they will capitalize on that instance and then drive a wedge between the people in the population. So every black person, I learned quickly at university. I went to university, I don't want to say as a liberal because I was always quite conservative, but very open-minded in spite of being a conservative. And I learned quickly that, the people who were most racist on campus were the blacks. And they were racist because they thought you were racist. And that was the funniest part. They had this idea that you were racist. And you were like, well, I'm not racist. Well, yes, you are. You're inherently racist. You'd be told this. And you realize quite early on that the professors are driving into their brains that you're oppressed. The media is driving into their brains that they're oppressed. Then there's the politicians on the left driving into their brains that they're oppressed. So, they feel as they're oppressed. And this then leads to, on a lower level, it leads to just daily animosities between people. On a larger level, it leads to class division. It leads to racial division. It leads to violence. I mean, look at it in the United States now. I mean, white people are being targeted for violence by black folks who believe they're doing so because whites are evil. But they're not. They don't think about the fact that the welfare check comes in because, generally speaking, the richer elements of the country are paying for their keep. But they have this idea that the white man is evil. And you got to ask yourself, who's telling them that the white man's evil? Why isn't the media telling them that American white culture is great? It's a beautiful Anglo-Saxon culture. No, it's evil. It's inherently racist. And so it's intentional subversion from the people at the top. The people who control the media are the same people who control the government. And these people are intentionally driving a wedge between different populations. I mean, like I said, we're racial realists. We're not racist. But the biggest offenders of racial hatred are usually people who are not of non-European origin. And I think we've all learned that by now. That look at the George Zimmerman fiasco in the United States. It was an excuse for every black person to want to turn over a car and stab some white guy for no reason. Because George Zimmerman, who was defending himself, who was not even a white guy, he was like a Hispanic guy, he was a racist, and the media just completely drove this home, and they incite this hatred, and it's really disgusting. I mean, we can look at South Africa. South Africa, I mean, it was a wonderful country. They had some problems. There were some issues that needed to be sorted out. It was a long time ago. But obviously, the people that were running that country, they knew how best to run their country. In time, there would have been organic changes. There would have been changes that gave people more freedom who were maybe non-white. But what these subversive elements within the government and within the private sector in South Africa, one was immediate change. And it was not because the blacks were being mistreated per se. It's because they just wanted to subvert the culture and destroy it's obviously not the majority culture in South Africa, it was a minority culture, but they wanted to attack in what their view was the last vestige of European colonialism. So they saw the white European government in South Africa, and they saw them as the ultimate evil. So they wanted to find any way possible to destroy what was there. And look what's happened. Since South Africa was taken down, you got rape, murder, disease. It's going to be famine if it continues in the direction it's going. I mean, they're killing off all the farmers. I mean, how can you have a country, how can people get food if there's no farmers left? But still, they drive home this hatred. White's evil, blacks oppressed. And they ignore the tens of thousands of rapes perpetrated by blacks on other blacks and whites. But they want to point out Oscar Pistorius and his, violence towards his white girlfriend, nonsense like that. Because, the intention here is to subvert the culture, is to drive a wedge between the people and to drive animosity and to create hatred. And I think that's the key to South Africa, is that you have, you have a system where a group of really evil people want to destroy the country, and they're dressing it up as them trying to help the country.
Well, that's right. So basically what we should do then is say, all right, behind all these stories, say, well, yeah, but for that one, there's, hundreds or thousands of cases where, that's not even the case.
Of course that's what we should be doing. But at the end of the day, what can't happen, for one, it doesn't sell. And these people want to make money. And number two, they have a hidden agenda here. They will hide the truth to promote a lie that serves their interests. So, you got, for example, there's this poor American soldier we wrote about on the website who, this poor kid, he opened the door at 10 o'clock at night, and these two black guys knocked on his door asking for a ride. And his roommate was like, "Don't do it, mate." And he was like, "I feel guilty, I should help them," and something like that. And he felt guilty because he didn't want to be racist. And the poor kid was gunned down in cold blood in his car after offering these two thugs a ride. This story was completely brushed away. They should have used this story to show the savagery of this particular demographic of people. But instead, they ignored that to focus on a story like George Zimmerman, which was a complete non-story because of the fact that it made black people angry. It divided people. It served democratic interests. It served liberal interests. It served communist interests. And at the end of the day, you're not going to want your country to do well. These people do not want the country to do well. They are all about subverting the beauty of the country, subverting the culture of the country. And that's why we despise them on the left, and why we also don't like the far-right Stormfront crowd, because they're just a bunch of hate mongers themselves. They want to find every excuse in the book to say they're better than somebody else, and we don't want that nonsense. We want our countries to be smoothly run. We want the people to be happy. We want to obviously keep them as pure as we can, as indigenous as we can, keep cultures as pure as we can, but not through hatred, not through division. And like you said, the left is they divide on everything. It used to be class. Now it's race. Soon, it's going to be, gay, heterosexual. What's next? People who sleep with humans, people who sleep with animals. I mean, they'll find a way to divide society. As society devolves farther, they'll find different things to divide society. And it's all by design. If you look on our website, people can look at our articles. The same people who divided South Africa along racial lines are the same people who bring Islamist immigration into Sweden, which increases rape, are the same people that control the Hollywood media. These are the same people over and over and over again. And I think we need to identify these people, and we need to find a way to we need to find a way to exclude these people from the conversation, because they should not be, spreading the hatred they're spreading.
Yeah, but every time that there's a big website comes up that doesn't do something, they just go up and buy the website for millions or billions of dollars, whatever it takes.
Of course, yeah. I mean, they control both left and right. I mean, they control everything. Fox News is. A lot of Americans see Fox News as this conservative, magazine, newspaper, whatever it is. It's a Zionist rag. It is nothing more than a Zionist mouthpiece. And that's the way it is. Fox News. I have friends in the United States who will tell me, oh, it's a conservative. It's Zionist. It's controlled by the same people who control liberal MSNBC. They might have a different approach to things, but at the end of the day, they spread the same vile disinformation, just in a different way. They manipulate people differently. They're able to get a different demographic to support their stupid policies. Yes, maybe Fox will find certain instances where, they'll find a topic. We might agree with on some things, but at the end of the day, these people are all on the same page. I think of someone like Pamela Geller. She's an American. She's a Jewish American Zionist. She's pro-Israeli, and she calls herself a Christianist. And she has a website that's for Christians. And it's quite remarkable, because every single story on the website, eventually all roads lead to Rome. In her case, all roads lead to Israel. So even if she says that she's got an opinion about something that happens in Tennessee, it will always come back to how Islam is evil, or we need to support Israel. So these people use their websites to spread this information, because they all have they have all their own hidden agendas. And it's sad that that's the case, especially in the United States, where every single, pretty much all the mainstream newspapers are run by the same people. The news media is run by the same people. They might have slightly different ideologies, but at the end of the day, it's, same intention.
All right. So, hey, let's take a break now.